Coming on the air tonight with the president's son now indicted on federal charges. The end result of a plea deal falling apart in a big way. Hunter Biden now facing those gun charges. We've got the paperwork, the new reaction from both his team and Capitol Hill coming up in just a second. Plus, time is running out tonight for that big auto workers union and three of the biggest car companies to get to a deal. We are just a matter of 6+ hours away. Why it's looking more and more like these workers are going to be off the job and on the picket line as soon as tomorrow. Then Alec Murdoch, remember him, the convicted double murderer? He is back in court now today, facing a bunch of new charges, this time not for killing anybody, but for alleged money schemes. By his attorneys, don't want this new trial to start anytime soon. Plus, in tonight's Newsmaker, we go one-on-one with superstar Jack Johnson, born and raised in Hawaii, how he learned about the wildfires in Maui and what he's doing tomorrow to try to give back. And some pretty extraordinary new research out today, giving all of us a peek into what life after near death looks like. Oh, yeah, that's coming up later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we are coming on the air tonight with the president's son formally indicted on gun charges. Charges brought by special counsel David Weiss. You see him here, spotted exclusively by NBC News at his office today. Part of a federal case that marks a stunning 180 from the plea deal we thought we'd see just a couple months ago that has fallen apart in spectacular fashion. The central accusation now against Hunter Biden, that he lied about not being addicted to drugs when he bought a handgun. From his father, President Biden. Silence so far tonight, with the president saying nothing about Hunter at an event late today. From Hunter Biden's team, angry pushback as his attorneys insist so-called MAGA Republicans interfered to try to get the hammer brought down on the president's son. And from some of those Republicans on Capitol Hill, the feeling that even these federal charges do not go far enough.
That's one of about a dozen crimes that Hunter Biden's committed. And ironically, that's the one crime that he committed that you cannot tie Joe Biden into.
Where are the charges on human sex trafficking, FARA charges, money laundering, tax evasion? I think there should be a lot more coming.
I want to bring in our team covering every angle of this. Ryan Nobles is on Capitol Hill. Our legal correspondent Laura Jarrett is with us. Ali Rafa is outside the White House. Ryan, I want to start with you. What we're hearing tonight from Hunter Biden's team and how this went from a deal to these serious charges.
Yeah, that's right, Hallie. And the Hunter Biden legal team really believes that this indictment is the result of intense political pressure that was put on this relatively newly appointed special counsel, David Weiss. Listen to part of what Abby Lowell, the attorney for Hunter Biden, said in a statement to us tonight. He said prosecutors filed charges today that they were deemed not warranted just 6 weeks ago. He goes on to say the evidence in this matter has not changed in the last 6 weeks, but the law has, and so has MAGA Republicans' improper and partisan influence in this process. And, you know, what Abby Lowell is pointing to is the fact that, you know, just a couple of weeks ago, the prosecutors in this case, the Hunter Biden legal team had thought that this matter was going to be put behind them. They had arranged for a plea deal for Hunter Biden to plead guilty on misdemeanor tax charges and then go through a pretrial diversion program. And this dates back to when the investigation was open back in 2018. And then they announced that they had this deal in June of this year. Then the plea deal fell apart during this hearing, in part because the judge was uncomfortable with the trial diversion program that was related to these gun charges that are now being filed today. She was going to be put in charge of that program. She did not think that was appropriate. Then a special counsel was appointed after the fact, and now the charges come down against Hunter Biden. Now, we don't know if this is the sum total of the charges. There could be more charges specifically related to these tax accusations as well, and we know the investigation into Hunter Biden is ongoing. These are the charges that he is facing. The first count is a false statement in purchase of a firearm. That carries on its own a maximum of a 10-year prison sentence, $250,000 fine. Also, false statements regarding the information that he kept by a federal firearms license dealer and the accusation that he was addicted to illegal drugs while possessing a firearm. That's against the law. We should point out, Hallie, this is not generally something prosecutors file charges on, but there's no doubt that this is a unique situation involving the president's son.
You're standing there on Capitol Hill, Ryan, just a couple of days after it was announced there would be an impeachment inquiry against President Biden based on business dealings related to his son, Hunter Biden, right? The Hunter story has been part of the Capitol Hill story for months, if not years at this point. We know that House Republicans are dissatisfied with these charges. They feel like they should go further, they say. Democrats are also dissatisfied with these charges for a different reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's impossible not to link the two things together, right? The impeachment inquiry and this federal prosecution of Hunter Biden. But in reality, they really don't have anything to do with each other.
Right.
Hunter Biden, the charges against Hunter Biden have nothing to do with his father. They have nothing to do with his business dealings, at least not yet. But that's part of the frustration by Republicans. They believe that Biden has not been given a close enough scrutiny by the federal agencies in charge of this. And Democrats on the other side of it believe that Hunter Biden's actually been treated too harshly by the Justice Department and other people, and they say that's an example of Joe Biden not putting his thumb on the scale. Listen to what Eric Swalwell said earlier today.
I've got 3 little kids, and I know they're not going to be perfect, and I'm not a perfect son myself. And I think the bond between the parent and a child is unbreakable. And it's also probably the hardest thing in the world to have, Donald Trump's prosecutor investigate your own son. But that shows that President Biden believes in equal justice.
And of course, Hallie, this against the backdrop of the 2024 presidential campaign, which is really just now starting to gear up.
Ryan Noble's live for us there on the Hill, juggling a lot of moving pieces. Thank you. Laura Jarrett, let me bring you into the equation here. Just real talk here. If an average person in this country did what Hunter Biden is accused of having done, would they face these same charges?
They would face the same charges, and they would probably plead guilty to those charges, Hallie, because the facts are really pretty straightforward, and there actually isn't a real dispute about the fact that he did not say on the form that he was addicted to drugs, because otherwise he wouldn't be able to get the gun. And we know that he did, and we know that he had it for roughly 11 days. Now, his lawyers will say, look, he wasn't an actual risk to public safety. It's not even clear that it was loaded. The problem for them is that in the eyes of the law, it doesn't actually matter. All that matters is that he actually lied on the form and that he possessed the gun when he was under the influence of drugs. Now, the risky part here for prosecutors is that one of the laws that's being charged here, one of the federal laws, one of the statutes at issue, has actually been struck down by at least one federal appeals court. Now, that's a different case, different set of circumstances, but I think it does sort of underscore, Hallie, the risk that prosecutors have here in the first case against a sitting president's son to use such a gamble.
Yeah, it is a moment that is making history, regardless of whichever side of the political aisle you're on. And this is not even the last shoe to drop, right, Laura? There may be more charges coming down the pipeline.
Well, we don't know. And the fact that the special counsel is saying the investigation continues can't cause, I think, Hunter or his lawyers any comfort to sleep at night. This has obviously been something of a question mark about whether it would be just the gun charges or related to tax issues, which we know are still outstanding. So we could still see those charges. The special counsel has the authority to bring charges anywhere in the United States. So it continues.
Laura Jarrett, thank you very much for that. I want to bring in Hallie Raffa now, who is outside the White House. We know that the president was in Maryland today for an event on basically the economy. Did not answer questions on this. It's not even clear if he heard those questions, didn't address it on his own. At this point, is it not unsustainable for the president to not engage? In other words, at some point, he will likely have to address the federal charges against his kid.
Absolutely, and there's no sign that the questions to him about this are going to die down anytime soon. But I think it's safe to say that the White House is going to maintain this posture until it becomes riskier for them politically rather than not speaking out and commenting on this. And you think of how the president has answered questions about Hunter Biden for years now. He said that he loves him, he supports his son, that he doesn't believe that his son did anything wrong. But Hallie, the Justice Department, in issuing these new charges, is trying to prove the exact opposite by doing this. And so we know that Hunter Biden has long been seen as one of the president's biggest political vulnerabilities, but I don't think we've ever seen up until this point Republicans use Hunter Biden against the president in the way we're seeing now. Think of these charges coming just 2 days after this impeachment inquiry was launched into the president. So obviously, that's different from these gun-related charges, but Republicans are really trying to lump anything with the last name Biden together as political ammunition. And we saw that evidenced by Republicans seizing on that silence from the president, from the White House today, trying to insert their opinion in lieu of any comment from the White House or president.
Hallie Raffa, thank you very much. I know you'll be watching this in the days to come. Appreciate it. Let's take you out to the Midwest, if you will, because right now it seems like any kind of optimism heading into tonight is fading pretty quickly for that big auto workers union and the three big car companies to come to a deal to avoid a major strike. Clock ticking tonight. Midnight tonight, 11:59 p.m. Eastern time is up. There is still no deal on the table. Doesn't look like either side is getting any closer to actually getting one. Look at this. People are already getting their signs ready in a tee-up of sorts for a strike in this fight for more money and better benefits. But some of the workers telling our team they're ready. Watch.
In terms of mobilization, is this group ready to go?
Absolutely. We are. 97%, as you can see on Tracy's button over there, that are voting to strike. And, yeah, we're behind it.
Listen, if this strike does happen, it would be a very, very big deal. The potential first strike against all three companies in this huge union's 80-year history. You maybe could see something like 140,000 people walking off the job, something that could send some real ripple effects through the economy. And it's putting some pressure on President Biden, who has long branded himself as pro-union, to maybe step in and do something. I want to bring in Jack Brewster, who is outside one of these auto plants, one of these car factories in Indiana. So, okay, two sides are still trying to work something out. Here we are, 5:11 Eastern time, right? We've got until 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. What is your sense that there will be a literal 11th hour deal here?
Hallie, it's not looking good. Look, anything is possible. We do know that GM, for example, said that they sent over another offer to the UAW. We do know that Ford, they briefed members of the media defending their what they called historic offer. But you're also seeing that both sides are exchanging this deep sense of frustration that the other side is not listening or not really being there in good faith. Our Jesse Kirsch actually just caught up with the Ford CEO, and he asked him, what are the chances that there's a deal before that deadline? Listen to what he had to say.
We still don't have a deal. Everyone imagines us, it's kind of funny, that we're in a room squirreled away trying to get this deal done. That's not happening.
So it seems as things are stalled. That's exactly actually what I was imagining, that they're in a room trying to hammer out a deal, but it seems like that is not happening right now, Hallie.
You know, we talk about the scale of a potential strike, so let's look ahead, right? Because let's say this doesn't come together by midnight. Now we're flashing forward to what a strike looks like. I want to just clear up some perhaps misperceptions on this. It does not mean that all 140,000 members of this union leave their jobs all at once. It could be targeted, 10,000 here, 10,000 here, and that could still have some crippling effects on the economy.
It still could have a real significant effect. I mean, just imagine with your show, Hallie, if you were there, if I were there, if we had segment producers writing everything, but the director or the control room decided not to come and not to go into work, there would be no show. It wouldn't matter that we are there. Well, that is somewhat of the strategy that you're seeing the auto workers take here, where it might not be the entire facilities or entire towns where you don't have workers going into work, but key parts, key plants that are making critical parts will be offline, and we don't know what those plants are just yet. That's part of the strategy, and what that does on the back end also is that allows their strike fund to hold up, and it makes sure that it's sustainable a little bit longer. It can allow for a longer strike. You know, when you talk to these auto workers, they say that this is about fairness for them. They look at average pay overall. If you look across the industries, you see that pay has gone up about 16% or so. Well, it's lagged for auto workers. They say that for CEOs, however, you saw their pay has exceeded what you look at the averages across the country. So they say this is about fairness. Automakers and CEOs are saying that this is just not sustainable. This is about the future of the industry, and they can't meet the demands that the UAW are making. You really don't get the sense of how you bridge the gap, especially within this short time period that we have, Hallie.
Jack Brewster, you are in the thick of it. I know you're going to be there for hours to come to see if anything changes. Thank you, friend. Listen, in just the last couple of minutes, we've gotten the latest update from the National Hurricane Center. And we're finding out that Hurricane Lee is getting bigger. That means that those tropical storm warnings are extending even further along New England's coast. Lee is getting closer and closer, which means that parts of this country, way up in New England, could start feeling the impact of it maybe as soon as tomorrow. Maine is under its first hurricane watch in 15 years, and the governor there just declared a state of emergency. Now, listen, based on the track as we know it, it is unlikely that this storm is going to make a direct hit on Maine or New England, right? It's not a function of where Lee makes landfall. It's a function of how big and sprawling this storm is, which means the outer bands could dump a ton of rain and punishing winds in some of these spots. I want to bring in meteorologist Bill Cairns. So it's getting bigger, again, not about where it actually hits. It's about how sort of the wide swath that it could affect.
That's correct. But the further away it is from the U.S. coast, the less those effects will be. And, Hallie, it is so nice to actually have a trending storm being less impactful for once. It seems like lately, in the last couple of years, every single storm just gets worse and worse and worse as it approaches land. So let me explain everything. So, obviously, you can see how huge the storm is. I mean, it's a really, really big storm. It's not that intense. It's, it's almost barely holding on to hurricane strength, and it's not going to get any stronger than this. So, Hurricane Center actually has it maintaining its strength over the next 24 hours. The only impacts through this time tomorrow, the large waves will begin arriving through the Carolinas, all the way through the mid-Atlantic, the rip currents, and a little bit of gusty winds, probably nothing you'll even notice. Friday night and Saturday is when the storm will get closest to especially Cape Cod. Areas in yellow have the best chance for tropical storm force wind gusts. That means you have the best chance for power outages. Notice, Boston, you're out of that now. Portland, you're out of that too. Montauk is on the edge. Cape Cod, at least, looks to be areas with the best chance of power outages, and also down East Maine. And I'll be surprised if they issue these hurricane warnings for the Maine coast. Likely it'll be tropical storm warnings. And these wind gusts, we could deal with this. Boston only to 43, and Fall River, Providence, 40 range. It's out here on the Cape, Hallie, that we have the best chance of seeing trees coming down and power outages. The rainfall forecast isn't bad either. We just have to worry about that storm surge in the bay, this little hook right in here from about Sandwich to Brewster, and that'll be with that high tide about noon on Saturday. But this will not be $1 billion weather disaster like a lot of our other hurricanes. At this point, I'm happy to say this looks like it'll be a minor event.
Bill Cairns, rare that you get to come on and share some good news, I think, for people who are bracing for storms. Thank you, friend. Appreciate it. So listen, intense criticism tonight about the warning system in Libya, as some UN experts say more lives could have been saved if people had an earlier start to get away from horrific flooding when dams broke there. More than 11,000 people have already been confirmed dead. And there are chilling predictions tonight that number could go as high as 20,000. And there's concern now that a lot of survivors and victims could be buried under mud and debris. The other big concern, disease, because the gruesome reality is there are so many bodies and so little space for those corpses. Josh Letterman is joining us now. Talk to us about the criticism of the maintenance of these dams that collapsed, the criticism now from the UN, and what happens next in Libya.
Yeah, and this has been a big question for several days, Hallie, because this situation is different, for example, than what happened in Morocco. In Morocco, you had an earthquake. Earthquakes kind of come out of nowhere, right? You don't really get any warning. But in Libya, you had a storm, and we generally know at least several days in advance when there's a storm moving in a certain direction. Today, we learned from the World Meteorological Association, basically the UN's weather agency, that in fact, the Libyan weather agency did know this storm was coming and issued alerts about 72 hours ahead of time. The UN's agency saying that means that the majority of these deaths could have been avoided. But while Libya's weather agency was able to say, look, we see extreme rainfall and flash flooding coming, the weather agency wasn't able to then talk about what the implications are going to be for those dams. That's not really the weather agency's responsibility, right? And this is where the failure of local agencies, of the regional government, of the national government, which doesn't exist in any cohesive fashion, comes into play. This is what emergency experts refer to as the chain of disaster management. You need each level of government doing their part to carry out a response to make sure those weather alerts turn into evacuation orders. That did not happen, and now we are seeing that massive loss of life. You mentioned the concern about disease and illness. We heard today from the Libyan Health Ministry saying they are worried about waterborne illness. They are worried about skin infections. We know that their version of the CDC has now deployed to these areas and are also sending in mobile clinics to try to get on top of this, Hallie.
Josh Letterman, thank you very much for that reporting. In Florida now, Governor Ron DeSantis launching his latest fight against COVID vaccines, with his team now telling people in that state not to get the new COVID shots, even though the CDC says the exact opposite. They say, yes, go get them if you're 6 months or older. We actually recommend, they say, that you go and get this vaccine. DeSantis himself, and I'm quoting here, saying, "I will not stand by and let the FDA and CDC use healthy Floridians as guinea pigs," he says, for new booster shots that have not been proven to be safe or effective. Keep in mind, the CDC has said the exact opposite, that the vaccines have been proven to be safe and effective, as that agency is now firing back at the governor. Dasha Burns is joining us now. DeSantis has tried to use some of these COVID shot concerns as a political tool. That is part of the backdrop for this latest back and forth that has exploded into the spotlight today. DeSantis spent part of his day defending what he's doing in Florida.
Well, Hallie, let's remember that it was DeSantis's bucking of the CDC and of federal COVID guidelines that really thrust him into the spotlight early on, that helped transform the Florida governor into a national Republican star at the height of the pandemic and arguably opened the door to his presidential bid. So now he's once again going against federal guidelines and advising to Floridians that people under the age of 65 do not get that COVID shot, that COVID booster. Now, the CDC is firing back. They're saying, quote, public health experts are in broad agreement about these facts, and efforts to undercut vaccine uptake are unfounded and dangerous. And look, as he struggles to catch Trump in the polls, he's leaning into what he knows works and what he feels is kind of the biggest contrast between him and the former president. So the former president did an interview with Megyn Kelly where he sort of tried to distance himself from Dr. Anthony Fauci, and DeSantis used that opportunity, has been on the offense today, really talking about how the former president needs to take more accountability, talking about how Trump, just recently we got a transcript from an interview he did where he said Trump cared too much about the polls in his COVID response, saying that he just did a better job in Florida and that any of Trump's criticisms about DeSantis when it comes to COVID are simply unfounded, talking again about how the difference between the national response and the Florida response just says so much about the difference between these two candidates. And so while he's the governor of Florida making these decisions right now, we can't forget that he is also a candidate, and this very much plays into his strategy on the campaign trail as well. The problem is this is also, while politics, it also has an impact on people's health here, Hallie.
Dasha Burns, thank you very much. Convicted double murderer Alec Murdoch back in court today, facing yet another trial, which now has a start date for some of the hundreds of new charges against him, this time for alleged financial crimes. Here he is, being seen now back in court with the state judge ordering that he's got to go back to trial November 27th on allegations he schemed his dead housekeeper's family out of a pretty big insurance payout, meaning we are going to see Murdoch in court again, just months after his very public murder case came to an end. His lawyers are none too happy about any of this. Listen.
This case was finished 6 months ago. To try this case in less than a year after the verdict came in the other case, don't we need to let it calm down a little bit? Where are you going to get a jury? Mars?
He says, where are you going to get a jury? Mars, suggesting that because this other case, of course, where Murdoch was convicted, was so high profile, it could be tough to find a jury. Keep in mind that no matter how things go on these alleged financial charges, Murdoch will never be a free man. He is serving a life sentence after the conviction back in March on charges he killed his wife and his son. NBC's Sam Brock is following this one for us. So, Sam, it is in some ways deja vu all over again, because here we are again talking about the Alec Murdoch legal saga.
Indeed, and Hallie, Murdoch is facing 2 life sentences without the possibility for parole. So with that as a backdrop, it is also important to stress that on the state and federal level, if you combine the financial charges against him, he's looking at more than 100 charges for stealing roughly $9 million from his own clients, which does include the family of Gloria Satterfield, his longtime housekeeper who died on their property. And she and her family were supposed to receive all of this money. She has 2 adult sons who are considered part of the vulnerable population of adults. They need the financial assistance, and he is accused and his co-conspirator of stealing that money. So what the judge basically did was say, I understand your argument, Mr. Harpootlian, about the idea that we'll never find an impartial jury within 6 months of this murder trial and that you're not going to have enough time to prepare, etc. He basically called all of that hogwash and said that on November 27th, a couple months from now, this trial is going to start. So the timeline on this could just be very quickly. However, here's the other issue, Hallie. Last week, the Murdoch defense dropped a bombshell and said they have evidence of the county clerk tampering with jurors, which would be a major problem. If they can prove that, and the information is coming from sworn affidavits from jurors, if they can prove that and the murder trial has to happen again, you can start this clock and the media circus all over again.
What else are we finding out about these alleged co-conspirators here, Sam?
This gets really interesting. So Corey Fleming is one of those co-conspirators. This is someone who is a roommate of his during law school, also a partner with Murdoch. He was found guilty. He certainly pleaded guilty, both on the state and federal level, for stealing all this money, roughly $4 million. And the judge said, I want to make an example of you. Within the last hour or two, the sentence was handed down for 20 years on the state level. That is on top of the 4 years that he already had received on the federal level. They run concurrently, so it's a total of 20 years. But still, the state called this, and I should say the judge called this the worst crime he could imagine by an attorney in South Carolina's history. Here is Mr. Fleming himself apologizing to the families that he stole from. Take a listen.
Today, I offer this court no excuses. There are no excuses. I place the blame for my actions on my shoulders, nobody else's. I never imagined standing here and being in this circumstance.
He said that Gloria Satterfield was a good woman, that she had a very lovely family. They did not deserve this, and he apologized sincerely, but obviously the sentencing right now, 20 years behind bars, Hallie.
Sam Brock, live for us there with the story. Sam, thank you. Some new questions tonight over when Donald Trump will go to trial in Georgia. But here's what we do know. It's not going to be in October. This is after a Fulton County judge today separated the former president's case, along with 16 others, from the trial of 2 former attorneys, which is set to start next month. It's kind of a loss for the district attorney, Fani Willis, and her team, who wanted all 19 defendants to go to trial together. NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now. So the billion-dollar question, Danny, if the former president's trial is not going to be in October, when's it going to be?
That is the big question. And if you're asking me, my prediction is later rather than sooner. I would go so far as to say possibly 2025, not 2024, 2025. I know the district attorney has some ambitious time that she wants to get into court, and I understand that. But this is state court, and things in Fulton County simply don't move that quickly. There's a RICO case in Fulton County right now. It's been in 8 months of jury selection. So even if you have a trial date for Donald Trump in 2024, you're probably not calling first witnesses until 2025.
Danny Savalos, lots of developments on that today. Thank you very much. Coming up here on the show, what NASA did and did not find in its years-long study of UFOs. We've got that coming up in just a sec. Plus, that very luxury cruise ship stranded in Greenland that we told you about earlier this week has finally been freed. How another boat got it unstuck, the little boat that could, in our 5 things. Another prison escapee still on the loose in the Washington area. The new reward for this murder suspect on the run coming up. But first, a UFO gut check from NASA tonight, with the agency in this highly anticipated report saying there's no proof that the stuff that's been flying around is alien. But other than that, they're just not sure.
The NASA independent study team did not find any evidence that UAP have an extraterrestrial origin. But we don't know what these UAP are.
So those UAPs he's talking about, unidentified aerial phenomena, that's the jargony way of saying UFO. That's what you're seeing here. NASA says some of this stuff ended up just being like planes or balloons or drones. I want to bring in Aaron Gilchrist for more on this. Listen, they're taking it seriously enough to put in place somebody who's going to direct essentially agency scrutiny of UAPs, but still a lot of question marks out here and some recommendations.
And I think the fact that they're putting somebody in charge of looking at this data says to the rest of the world, you know what, it's time that we take this seriously. The administrator said that it's time to move from sensational to scientific when we're talking about UFOs. And so the agency with this panel, which had stood up last year, and this is the first concrete action that NASA has ever taken to look into UFOs in 65 years of its history. And this panel said, you know what, here are a couple of recommendations, things we think NASA can do that no other agency can do that will really force us to take a scientific look at the videos and the photos and all the things that seem to come out there with the reporting about unexplained things in the air. You can see some of the recommendations on the screen here. They think that using artificial intelligence, using machine learning will go a long way toward being able to definitively identify these things that have so far been unexplained. And all the tools that are available to NASA, satellites and the like, could help to get some real answers as opposed to just, you know, the photos and the, I think I saw something floating around.
The speculation. I do wonder what this says about momentum inside the community of sort of UFO watchers, people who are looking for answers here. And if there were actually any evidence of non-human life or alien stuff, whatever, if we would even see it, Aaron. I mean, we know that this country can keep a secret.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's been the thing for decades, right? Where, you know, the government knows that there are aliens and they just aren't telling us about it. And so in the conversation today, the NASA administrator said over and over again that NASA will be transparent, that NASA wants to take the information that it gathers, a lot of it is unclassified information that NASA is looking at, and that it's going to make that information available to the general public. I want to play a little bit of what Administrator Nelson said about making things available to everybody.
You bet your boots. We will say that. And I've tried to set the table for you by telling you what I personally believe in a universe that is so vast that could there be a replication of life on Earth elsewhere in another solar system that is so big? Of course I believe that.
But because scientists are the folks who work at NASA, he says that they want the evidence. Right. They want to be able to say that this points to direct evidence that life exists or that there are entities that are bringing things into our atmosphere. And, you know, you talk about transparency. The DOD, the national intelligence community, will do what it does. But Nelson
which isn't tell us about stuff that's classified. That's
right, if it's classified. But Nelson says when they collect information, if they find answers, they intend to make it public.
Well, he said he bets his boots.
That's right.
So we'll take him up on that.
Nice boots, I bet.
Sure does. Aaron Gilchrist, thank you so much. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, 4 Dallas police officers are in the hospital tonight after they were plowed into by a car this morning. Police say these officers were responding to a shooting. They were barricading the road when a separate car barreled through the barricade, hitting a police car. Police say suspects from both incidents are in custody, and the officers are expected to be okay. Number 2, that cruise ship we told you about that's been stuck for a few days in Greenland has now been successfully pulled free. The ship's owner says nobody on board was hurt. A couple people had COVID and had to isolate. They're still trying to figure out how it ran aground in the first place. Number 3, Bill Maher says his show, Real Time with Bill Maher, is coming back. He is the first late-night host to make this move since writers started striking back in May. Keep in mind the context here. Drew Barrymore, for example, has said her daytime talk show is coming back. Maher says his is going to look a little different. It'll be unscripted. He says he didn't want to see his other staff struggling without work. Number 4, to help out crews during that actors and writers strike, by the way, stars are now auctioning off all kinds of things. You can bid on Adam Scott, walk in your dogs. You can Zoom with the cast of New Girl, play 20 questions with Sarah Silverman. A lot of these prizes that are out there online already have bids of more than $1,000. It's all meant to raise money to support the employees who are striking. The auction closes in a week. Number 5, and another wild auction, Princess Diana's iconic black sheep sweater, you see it here, has sold for more than $1 million. Officials say that breaks the world auction record for clothes worn by Princess Di, becoming now the most valuable sweater ever auctioned off. When we come back, a lot more to get to, including some pretty scary moments in Texas with a group of Girl Scouts. Look at this, trying to get away from an alligator in a lake. Plus, new details coming into us tonight on that big cyber attack that hit some Vegas casinos. Who paid up, who did not, and the consequences some are still dealing with. Next. Tonight, we are just learning that Caesars, you know, that huge casino in Vegas, they've apparently paid a $15 million ransom to a cybercrime group to avoid a major cyber attack. This is according to sources familiar with the matter, who tell our partners over at CNBC that Caesars paid up after this group managed to infiltrate its systems and get access to sensitive customer information. That ransom, interestingly, listen to this timing, was paid only days before MGM Different set of casinos got hit with a cyber attack of its own from the same group. MGM is still, even tonight, trying to get its systems back up and running. This cyber attack created problems with keys, right? With people trying to get into their rooms, with reservations, even with some casino operations. The difference here, MGM did not pay up when this group demanded ransom, while Caesars did. Dana Griffin is live for us in Los Angeles, and it is super interesting because it is this broader issue of ransomware attacks writ large, and we are seeing two huge companies dealing with it in two very different ways, it seems, based on this reporting.
Yeah, Hallie, and it's very hard to track these attackers because oftentimes they demand payment in cryptocurrency. As you mentioned, we heard that Caesars had their attack September 7th. That was last Thursday. MGM had their attack on Monday. Caesars says that the unauthorized actors acquired a copy of their loyalty program database, which included driver's license and social security numbers for a significant number of its members. On the flip side, MGM, according to Moody's, is now what they consider credit negative. And that is because this attack has posed additional risks to MGM, including potential revenue losses while their systems were down and continue to be down. And it also is a hit to their reputation and could add to more costs related to the investigation and remediation. That's why a lot of times you hear from cybersecurity experts who say companies tend to pay so that they don't have to deal with the litigation. We've also received a statement from MGM CEO Bill Hornbuckle, who says they continue to work diligently to resolve this issue, Hallie.
I wonder, do we have any sense of why this particular group believed to be behind this is targeting casinos? Is that like part of a broader play?
We don't know, but I actually have some new reporting for you. The hacker group that allegedly is a part of this attack released a statement today saying that they will continue to carry out additional attacks targeting MGM resorts if a deal is not reached with the company. The FBI is investigating, and experts believe that this is the same group that is responsible for both the Caesars attack and the MGM attack. So it's obviously concerning. It's unclear if other groups could be a part of this list of targets, but this is something that we've seen across so many different industries, especially the healthcare industry. We've seen so many hospitals targeted by these sort of attacks, so it's very concerning. Hallie?
Dana Griffin live for us in L.A. Concerning and obviously still a concern ongoing for MGM. Dana, thanks. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day. And because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Southern Bureau, some pretty scary video out of Texas after this big alligator, look at this, charges at a group of Girl Scouts swimming in a lake. Watch. You can see the group trying to get away from the gator, which is estimated to be like 14 feet long. Fortunately, nobody was hurt. All the members of the troop got out. They closed the area for the rest of the day. Park officials are now considering trying to remove the gator from the lake altogether. Out of our Washington Bureau, officials here are offering, police in D.C. are offering $30,000 for any information on a murder suspect who escaped custody at a hospital last week. Officials say he should be considered dangerous, and if you see him, you can see him here. Call 911. They're trying to look into how he escaped. And out of our Southern Bureau, a jury has just awarded $100,000 to a same-sex couple in Kentucky who were denied a marriage license by former county clerk Kim Davis in 2015. Davis was briefly put in jail over her refusal, which she says was based on her religious beliefs. A lawyer for Davis says she would appeal and wants to take it to the Supreme Court. Coming up here on the show, what does life look like after you almost die? We'll tell you what researchers found happening in people's brains up to an hour after their hearts stopped before they were revived. It's incredible. You got to hear about it. It's next. Some pretty extraordinary new research is giving us a glimpse at what life looks like after you almost die. It's the first study of its kind. It suggests that a lot of people who survive cardiac arrests and who were revived by CPR have some kind of awareness, even when they're unconscious and being resuscitated. About 40% of them say they have memories or like dream-esque experiences. And these experiences they had are backed up by science. Brain waves that show signs of activity, in some instances for as long as an hour as these people are being brought back to life. Dr. Kavita Patel is joining us now. And Dr. Patel, top lines here, because you're a doctor, you've had to give CPR to people. You have had, in some instances, small number of instances, you were able to resuscitate somebody. Right. We were chatting during the commercial break, just full disclosure, and you said you are not at all surprised by these results. Tell me.
No. First of all, it's about the same rate I've experienced. About 9% of these resuscitations result in someone who kind of gets discharged from the hospital, and that's what I've personally experienced. And then of those people, a proportion of them describe these vivid scenes, even recalling details of being resuscitated or being kind of having someone that's died in their life, telling them something and recalling these conversations. It just illustrates to me something that we've all seen in medicine, where there is a very blurry line at times between life and death, and that's that moment at resuscitation that you're at that border and you're right there in the moment. And I'll tell the resuscitation team, he or she can hear us, so let's be aware of that. And we say that even with patients in a coma, that they might be able to hear us. But this study just sheds light on there's a lot of things that we sometimes don't understand. And you can call it a higher power, but I kind of think of it as we're in that in-between space while we're resuscitating someone.
And were you surprised to see the science back it up, the brainwave activity?
No, and we've often kind of thought that, because people will all describe during moments of resuscitation, and especially if you get to meet the patient when they're discharged.
Have you had that experience?
I have, and they've said, "Doctor, I think I remember your voice," or "Your voice sounds so familiar." And I'll say, you know, your heart stopped beating. So I think that's amazing. But their brain activity, as we now know in this study, illustrated that they had brainwave activity. And then, of course, these people, it's a small number, 28, but these are the people that survived. And they survived, and they were able to be interviewed. So we have the most information from survivors.
I feel like in any other instance, you and I would talk about a study, and 28 would seem like such a tiny sample size. How seriously should we be taking the results of this study?
I think in light of the fact that we're trying to educate more people about the benefits of CPR, I think this is a great illustration. 28 is a small number. To me, the big number is that these are 28 people that would never have been able to give these interviews if we didn't have that resuscitation and this technology. We've had a lot of famous people that have gotten in the news for resuscitation, but this reminds you that it could be anybody. It could be you. It could be me that was in that hospital bed, and all the memories from it.
Does this give you an extra beat now? And you already do it, as you say, just to say, like, okay, you do want to kind of have that calm demeanor in that room.
We do, and remember, it's a person. It's so easy.
Yes.
We try to be objective in medicine. It's a person. It's someone's mother, daughter, sister, father, and that's that person. And they might remember my voice, and that might be something that gives them peace at that moment. And even if they don't make it, that might give them peace in that moment, and that's important.
Dr. Patel, Dr. Patel, it is intense stuff. It's heavy, and I appreciate you being here to talk us through it. Thank you. We've got a lot more to get to here on the show, including superstar Jack Johnson talking recovery and rebuilding in his native Hawaii after those deadly fires in Maui. The big news he's hoping to make tomorrow to try to help. We'll go one-on-one in the Newsmaker next. Tomorrow, a new push to try and get more help to people on the island of Maui, as we're getting a better sense now of the scope of the disaster 5 weeks after a wildfire incinerated the historic town of Lahaina. 115 people confirmed dead, 800 businesses lost, more than 2,000 buildings destroyed. 7,000 people are now unemployed, and 16,000 have asked for help from FEMA. It's against that backdrop that superstar Jack Johnson, the musician who grew up in Hawaii, is joining forces with 2 others to release a benefit album tomorrow and perform a sold-out show Monday to raise money and support the recovery. Jack Johnson is joining us now. Thank you so much for being with us. I know this has been a long and difficult road for you and so many people in Hawaii. We're glad to have you here. Can you talk a little bit, sir, about what it was like? Sort of take me back to when you first heard what was happening, when you woke up and heard, like so much of the rest of the world did, about what had happened to Lahaina and to this state that you know and that you love.
Yeah, well, woke up to sort of the news in the morning, and word travels fast these days. There's so many ways to communicate. And so I started getting sort of text and phone calls from friends and getting filled in that it was unfortunately going to be a lot more devastating than we were even hearing at first. And yeah, the stories are just heartbreaking. I mean, I live 2 islands away. I'm on Oahu, but Maui is really close to my heart. I got a lot of close friends and family over on Maui and spent a lot of time there growing up with my dad and my parents and close friends. So yeah, just hearing the news and there were obviously multiple fires in different places. So I was just checking in the morning on lots of different families. And so anyways, yeah, just heart goes out to everybody in Lahaina. We're just trying to support that community as much as we can as we find out how we can support them.
I know one thing that's important to you and to so many people in Hawaii is maintaining the Hawaiian culture as the long and slow rebuilding process begins. One of the things we've covered a lot on this show has been this tension between, you know, what happens to these properties, the issue that we've talked to people about the potential for predatory buyers coming in. How do you see that sort of tension between wanting to rebuild, wanting to make sure that people in Lahaina, people on Maui can rebuild, but also maintaining what is so special about this really incredible historic town?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's so many, it goes so deep, and I wish I could have all the answers for the really tough questions, because it's a worrisome time right now with people who've been there their whole lifetime and for generations, like you mentioned, unfortunately, like potentially losing their home. And so it's just trying to support as much as we can people getting their homes back. And then as the rebuilding process happens, just trying to have as many conversations as I can, because like I said, I know the place well, but I'm not from there. So it's all about listening to the people who are from there and learning how they want to rebuild their community, how to get it back to how it was, and just an even brighter future. If we can go back to a lot of the traditional ways that people were doing things before and incorporate them in our current culture. But there's, you know, beautiful stories of Huiova'a Kaulua, which is a Polynesian voyaging group that had one of the oldest canoes in Hawaii, Mo'olele. I keep telling the story because I think it's important for people to learn. It's if we can rebuild those types of things, we're the heart of the community to make sure to rally around. There's a lot of really amazing people. It's a really resilient community there. They just need our support, but it's just all about us listening to what they need and supporting their vision. Really.
That support is going to be so key. You look at the numbers, for example, on Maui, unemployment has skyrocketed. Something like 8,000 people filed for unemployment on the island since the fires happened in early August. Tourists, the message was clear, I think, tourists don't come here, right, in the immediate aftermath. Now, state officials say, hey, okay, it's time to get tourists back, but they're requesting respect, of course, for everything that happened, to treat this place with the respect that it deserves. What is, as a Hawaiian, a native Hawaiian, what is your advice to people here on the mainland, to people around the world who are looking at maybe a trip to Hawaii? What would you tell them?
That's such a tough question. It's really about listening to that community. I think they're going through a healing process right now, letting that community heal and have time to grieve. But, you know, there's many islands, and I'm sure that, you know, there's a lot of people on Maui that could use the support too. So figuring out ways that we can support those businesses, but really trying to listen to that community about when the right time is, in my opinion, you know. But it depends on who you talk to, I'm sure, with that one.
Do you see an opportunity to perhaps rebuild in a more sustainable way? You're somebody who's been a leader in trying to make the music industry more environmentally conscious. You've been an advocate for environmental education.
Yeah, so the way that environmental education gets talked about in Hawaii quite a bit is aina-based education. It's really about looking at the traditional knowledge that Hawaii had for generations and going back to things like the Ahupua'a system, which was basically a sustainable functioning system in most valleys around the islands. And so there's so much we can learn from the Hawaiian culture. And so I think there's a great opportunity to tap into a lot of that Hawaiian knowledge when going through the rebuilding process. There's, you know, people who've been doing things for a long time there before the fires happened that are some of the community leaders that are rising up during this time of just supporting, making sure people are sheltered and have food. Those are a lot of the same people that they know where the food comes from, they know how to provide it. And so they're a lot of the ones doing the feeding right now. So I think they're learning quite a bit, just even from these local food hubs, on ways that they could implement some of those things into the rebuild and building the community again.
So let's talk about tomorrow. Benefit album comes out. You've got this sold-out benefit concert Monday to try to raise some money for relief efforts. What should people know about that? I think the impetus to it sounds like, was you conversing with some people who are so shaken by the fires, going, hey, we've got to do something to help here. This is what we can do.
Yeah, the two friends that were on that cover image you just showed, Paula Funga and John Cruz. John lives on Maui and his family, and Paula spends a lot of time on Maui, has a lot of relatives there and friends. And so all three of us were just talking about trying to get a show together. And then the idea of going back and listening to this recording we had from 2012, there's just so much love from the audience you can hear, and just being able to, keep that love going and then right back to Maui. The idea that we liked is that perpetually this could every year be raising funds, because it's going to be a long story and it might fade for people outside of Hawaii, but it's going to be a long road to getting things back to some type of normalcy and then trying to expand on the beauty like we've been talking about. So this album is a way that we can continue to support as community members.
Jack Johnson, thank you so much. The album out tomorrow, the concert again on Monday. We so appreciate you being here and continuing to shine a spotlight on a place that we know means so much to you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for shining that spotlight today. I appreciate it.
That does it for us for this hour. We've got a lot more coverage picking up right now. We are coming on the air tonight with the president's son now indicted on federal charges. What Hunter Biden's team is telling us late today, what Hunter Biden's father is not saying, and the new reaction from Republicans on Capitol Hill who think this doesn't go far enough. We've got every angle covered live in just a minute. We're also live with the optimism fading fast for any kind of deal to avoid a big auto workers strike. That deadline right now, less than 6 hours from now. We'll get into the chances of an 11th hour deal and what those workers are planning if it doesn't come together. Then our Kristen Welker, one-on-one with former President Donald Trump, what he's saying about pardoning himself if he makes it back to the White House. That's just into us. We'll show you. Plus, convicted murderer Alec Murdoch back in court, this time not facing accusations of murder, but instead of money schemes. Why we may see him on trial again soon, and why his lawyers are invoking outer space when it comes to jury selection. We'll explain. And NASA now out with its long-anticipated report on those strange things flying through the air. The conclusion? Shrug emoji, if you will, and what NASA's doing to try to solve some of this mystery. That's coming up later in the show. Hey there, I'm Hallie, and we are coming on the air tonight with the president's son formally indicted on gun charges. Charges brought by special counsel David Weiss, who was seen exclusively by NBC News at his office today. You see him here. All of it part of a federal case that marks a stunning 180 from the plea deal we thought we'd see just a couple months ago that has obviously fallen apart in spectacular fashion. This is a moment that is making history. The indictment of the son of a sitting president with the central accusation against Hunter Biden that he lied about not being addicted to drugs when he bought a handgun that looks similar to this one. From his father, President Biden, silence so far tonight, with the president not saying anything about Hunter at an event late today. From Hunter Biden's team, angry pushback as his attorneys insist so-called MAGA Republicans interfere to try to get the hammer brought down on the president's son. And from some of those Republicans, the feeling that even these federal charges do not go far enough.
That's one of about a dozen crimes that Hunter Biden's committed. And ironically, that's the one crime that he committed that you cannot tie Joe Biden into.
Where are the charges on human sex trafficking, FARA charges, money laundering, tax evasion? I think there should be a lot more coming.
I want to bring in our team covering this, NBC's Garrett Hake, our legal analyst Danny Savalos, and our White House correspondent Ali Rafa live in Washington. Garrett, let me start with you here. We went from a potential plea deal just hours away to that to now flash forward serious charges, each of those charges carrying anywhere from 5 to 10 years in prison potentially. Tell us what we're hearing from Hunter Biden's attorneys and more about what he's facing.
Well, Hallie, these charges all deal with basically the same act. It's 3 separate counts, 2 related to lying on a federal form that you have to fill out to buy a handgun and essentially checking a box on that form that Hunter Biden was not a drug addict or addicted to drugs when he bought that form. The third charge, unlawfully possessing that firearm while being addicted to a controlled substance. His attorneys are out tonight with a blistering statement that basically says this is all politics, a statement that reads in part that prosecutors filed charges that they deemed were not warranted 6 weeks ago. They say that basically nothing has changed in the actual charges, but that MAGA Republicans have improperly interfered in this process. So basically arguing that this is political interference in a case that should never have been charged, that was probably close to being adjudicated, and that was close to its date by which they could not further be charged on these crimes. So basically a rush job for political purposes, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Well, and a political backdrop to this, Garrett, because we are out now, 48, 72 hours from the announcement of an impeachment inquiry against President Biden based on the business dealings of his son here, obviously Hunter. Separate things, right? The charges he's facing today do not relate to sort of that piece of it, although Republicans would argue that there's a lot that needs to be investigated about Hunter Biden. We know that they feel like these charges don't go far enough. Democrats are also not satisfied, but for a very different reason.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, House Republicans have basically argued that this is the least political charge, and they're using that as somehow ammunition to their idea that there's a two-tiered justice system here and that the DOJ won't go after Hunter Biden for anything which is related to Joe Biden. Democrats, on the other hand, are arguing that this is proof that the system works and that regardless of who your family is or who your father is, the rule of law will find you. At least that's the way that Eric Swalwell and some other House Democrats have played it today. Here's what the California congressman told us leaving the Capitol this afternoon.
I've got 3 little kids, and I know they're not going to be perfect, and I'm not a perfect son myself. And I think the bond between the parent and a child is unbreakable. And it's also probably the hardest thing in the world to have, Donald Trump's prosecutor investigate your own son, but that shows that President Biden believes in equal justice.
So for the political fallout on this, I think you're going to see 2 things. I think you're going to see Democrats continue to try to humanize Joe Biden as the anguished father having to deal with all this as relates to his son. And secondly, I think you're going to see House Democrats essentially separate themselves from Hunter Biden and separate Joe Biden from Hunter Biden, saying they're not going to defend his conduct, but that it doesn't relate to the president. It's the difficult juggling act on the Hill and an even more difficult one down the street at the White House, I am sure, Hallie.
Well, we're going to get to that in just a second. Garrett Hake live for us with all that. Appreciate it. But before we do, I want to get to Danny Savalos with some developing news just into us, because we are learning now tonight in just the last couple of minutes, Danny, and I'm just looking at my computer here, that Hunter Biden's team has now put out essentially like a memo, I guess you'd call it, arguing that these gun charges are unconstitutional. They argue that he's been singled out for prosecution, they say, under a statute that is rarely prosecuted at all, and say that given the Supreme Court's more robust interpretation of the Second Amendment, this statute, they argue, is plainly unconstitutional. Unravel that from a legal perspective. Are they correct?
They may be. I mean, in the last year alone, the Supreme Court issued an opinion called Bruin, which changed the landscape of firearm ownership in the United States. And when it comes to this particular section, there are other subsections of the firearms law that are very easy to prove. For example, if you're a felon in possession, it's pretty easy to determine whether or not you are or are not a felon by simply looking at certified records. It's a lot more difficult to prove whether or not you are not just an addict, but look at the disjunctive, addict or user. What's a user of marijuana? Is that somebody who takes a vacation to Amsterdam and tries marijuana there and then returns to the United States having done nothing illegal? Are you then a user of illicit drugs? So there are a number of potential challenges. And since Bruin last year, a number of these as-applied constitutional challenges have cropped up in the lower courts. So they may have something here.
If an average person, Danny, like a regular American, did the same thing that Hunter Biden is accused of having done here, would they also face charges, do you believe?
This subsection is not often charged. But at the same time, Hunter Biden did also get an offer, which is no longer on the table, but an offer of pretrial diversion, which virtually never happens in the federal system. I wasn't even aware it existed in the federal system. So on the one hand, there's a strong argument that Hunter Biden was charged with something that prosecutors never charge, probably because it's really difficult to prove. How do you prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone is an addict? It's another thing to prove that they're a felon. That's a lot easier. But an addict, that's a tougher case to make. So in one sense, Hunter Biden is charged with a crime that isn't often charged. Some of the other counts, 1 and 2, are more frequently charged. So those are more, if you cannot make false statements on these FFL applications, that is something that is charged.
Before I let you go here, there may be another shoe to drop, right, specifically related to tax fraud charges against Hunter Biden. Maybe.
That's the strange part, because the entire reason that the special counsel sought special counsel status, we believed, was because he might seek to prosecute Hunter Biden for tax crimes in other jurisdictions, other venues, and being special counsel gave him that jurisdictional spread to be able to do that. So now to have the next or the first indictment against Hunter Biden after that come from Delaware, that's the one place that the U.S. attorney did not need special counsel status in order to indict Hunter Biden. And it begs the question, if you're going to indict him, why not just do it all at once? But again, that same issue is what blew up the original pretrial diversion agreement a month or so ago when Hunter Biden walked into court expecting fully to get a pretty good deal and walking out realizing no deal.
Danny Savalos, more to come on this potentially. Thank you. Let me go to Hallie Raffin now. More to come, I would say almost certainly from the president. No, I mean, he did not address this today as he had an event on the economy in Maryland. He's got another event later on tonight at the White House. At some point, though, given the way that the White House has already pushed back on, for example, impeachment-related matters related to Hunter Biden, do you think we will hear from the president on the charges facing his son?
Yeah, Hallie, I think it's safe to assume the White House is going to continue this posture until they have proof that it's politically riskier for them to not comment on this than to comment on it. And that's coming, as we've heard for years now, that they've been silent on issues relating to the DOJ as part of the president's vow to maintain the White House's independence from the Justice Department. But this is the president's own son we're talking about. And remember, his own business dealings led House Republicans just 2 days ago to open this impeachment inquiry into any potential wrongdoing by the president himself. And we should mention there have been House Republicans who've said publicly that they don't have any evidence of that. But regardless, this is coming after years of the president saying that he supports his son, he loves his son, that he doesn't believe Hunter Biden did anything wrong. And yet you have his own Justice Department, the president's own Justice Department, trying to prove the opposite with these new charges as it relates to these gun charges in this indictment. And by not commenting on this, the White House and the president, they run the risk of allowing Republicans to seize the messaging around this situation. We saw some of it today coming from the former president himself. He posted on his social media platform earlier, in part, quote, "The gun charge is the only crime that Hunter Biden committed that does not implicate crooked Joe Biden." So no matter how much the president, believes in Hunter Biden's innocence, by staying silent, obviously that comes with some risks here. And it's hard to imagine if, as you talked about with Danny, if there are potentially more charges here, if this goes into a trial while the president is running for re-election, it's hard to imagine how he could survive politically maintaining this silence when, just imagine how many questions he's going to be asked about this. So.
Plenty. Hallie Raffin live for us there outside the White House. Hallie, thank you. We are just learning, speaking of President Biden, that he is talking with the head of that big auto workers union and leaders of those big car companies, with time running out for both sides to get to a deal on this potential strike that could happen at 11:59 p.m., midnight tonight, essentially. This is really the president flexing some political muscle here. He has long been known and long branded himself as a pro-union guy. Directly now talking, we've just learned from the White House, to the key players on both sides of this. As a reminder, you have the auto workers union, something like 140,000 plus members. You've got the big three car companies, GM, Stellantis as well. And you've got less than 6 hours now to come to terms on some kind of a deal. The union wants more money, better benefits. Obviously, the car companies have their own perspective here. Let me bring in Shaq Brewster, because, Shaq, we've already seen some people preparing picket signs, right, getting ready to get out to strike. And now you have President Biden. There had been a question mark, right? There had been a lot of discussion of how much would he try to seek to get involved here. Does this change the calculus in the 5.5 plus hours that we have left of whether there may be a deal that could come together?
It doesn't really, because you're not hearing many optimistic notes from either side of this debate. GM released a statement saying that they have submitted a counter proposal to the UAW. Some reporting out there suggests that they are moving up to about a 20% pay increase, which matches what Ford has done in the past couple of days, which they say they haven't received the counter offer yet. So you're not getting really good signals from the leadership right now. I want you to listen to a bit of the interview our colleague did with the CEO of Ford when asked if he's confident that there will be a deal by this deadline.
We still don't have a deal. Everyone imagines us, it's kind of funny, that we're in a room squirreled away trying to get this deal done. That's not happening.
Hallie, I'll tell you, that's kind of what I imagined, too. I thought when you get down to the wire, you get in the room, but he's saying that's not what's happening right now. He's saying that negotiations are actually stalled at this point. One thing you're hearing from both sides, though, Hallie, is that they're ready to be able to absorb a strike. You're hearing that from the automaker side, and you're also hearing that from auto workers. They have their signs ready. They have the picket line shifts ready. They have the plan ready to go if a strike is called, and we're just a couple of hours away from when that may be happening, Hallie.
GM, Ford, Stellantis, all involved in this here. If there is a strike, too, Shaq, it's not as though you're going to see necessarily all 140,000 plus workers walk off the job at the same time. The idea would be, very targeted strikes. 10,000 people here, 10,000 people there. That could still potentially inflict economic pain.
That's right. When you listen to experts here, they say this could still cripple the industry. Just imagine here in Kokomo, Indiana, there's a transmission plant and there's a casting plant. A casting plant provides those parts for the transmission plant. So even if the casting plant is the only one that's targeted in this strike, you can imagine the effect that'll have on the other plant. And there's some strategy here as well, because if that transmission plant, if those workers are still going to work, they're not getting that the strike fund, the money from the union that the union provides for striking workers, they're not having to tap into that fund for those workers going into the plant, but the impact is still there. So this is a unique situation in how this strike could play out. Not only are all three automakers, big automakers, being targeted here, but you have a situation where we don't know which plant you'll see workers walking out from once we hit midnight.
Okay, so what is the expectation of what we are going to see, Shaq, in the next 5 hours here? Like, are there going to be news conferences? Are we expecting to hear, big speech? Give us a sense. Give us the viewer's guide now, as we're going to be covering this tonight.
Yeah. The big thing to watch is 10 p.m. Eastern. That's when we'll hear from the president of the UAW. That's when he will announce if a strike will occur, Hallie.
All right, we'll talk then, I'm sure, or you will talk. Somebody will be talking. Shaq Brewster, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. So tonight, we are just learning in the last hour that Hurricane Lee is getting bigger, which means tropical storm watches are switching to warnings along the coast of New England. However, even as the storm is getting closer and closer, there is some relief because it may not be as bad as it could have been. That's because of the track that it's taking. That said, again, this is a big storm. New England is already starting to feel the impacts of it. Could be feeling more starting tomorrow. It's not going to make a direct hit, but the concern is its sprawling outer bands, whether that delivers punishing wind and rain. Right now, Maine is under its first hurricane watch in 15 years, and the governor there has just declared a state of emergency. Meteorologist Bill Cairns is joining us. And Bill, obviously the concern is the wind and the rain, but if Lee is going to track a little away, that's kind of good news for people in New England, no?
Yeah, relief if it does happen that way. We're not going to let our guard down because we never, until these storms are gone. But, yeah, it looks like Nova Scotia could take it more on the chin than areas in New England. So the storm itself, big, huge, now moving quicker to the north. And it's not going to weaken much more than it is. It's probably going to still be a hurricane this time tomorrow, maybe 85 or 75 mile per hour. But the winds are what is huge. The tropical storm force winds will be well away from the center. Even if this thing heads right for Yarmouth here on the western tip of Nova Scotia, these tropical storm gusts will be in coastal areas. They will not be inland. Inland areas of New England, you look just fine. It may not even rain, but we will see windy conditions, possible power outages, especially Nantucket, and then areas of down East Maine, Rockland to Bar Harbor, Bangor over here towards Machias. That's the area of greatest concern. As far as the warnings go, we do have tropical storm force warnings. All you need for that is 40 mile per hour gusts. There's a big difference between if you get gusts to 40 to 50 than say 50 to 70. 40 to 50, most of the trees, you get those during thunderstorms. Most of the trees hold up. But if we get the gusts above 50 to say 60 or 70, that's when you start getting power outages. And the only areas I really think that's possible is going to be out here on Cape Cod. Right now, the max gust inland here, and even for Boston, is not that bad. Portland, that's isolated power outages at worst. Bar Harbor, down East Maine, that's where it could be a little bit widespread. So we're not going to be talking hundreds of thousands without power at the end of the storm, maybe just thousands, and hopefully we'll get you back soon. The storm surge has been reduced from 2 to 4 to 1 to 3 feet in Cape Cod Bay. That's great news for you. And then the final thing with the rainfall, I mentioned it. If you're from Providence to Boston towards New York City, it's not going to rain. It may not even be cloudy, Hallie. You really have to be in areas of Maine or out on Cape Cod to feel the impacts of Lee.
Bill Cairns, thank you very much for that update. I know you'll continue to watch it. As you say, can't let our guard down just yet. Some intense criticism tonight about the warning system in Libya, as some UN experts say more lives could have been saved if people had an earlier start. to try to get away from the horrific flooding there after dams broke, with more than 11,000 people already confirmed dead. And chilling predictions, that number could get as high as 20,000 people. There's new concern tonight that survivors and more victims could be buried under mud and debris. And the other big worry, disease. Because the gruesome reality is that there are so many bodies and so little space for all those corpses. Josh Letterman is joining us now. Talk to us about the criticism of the maintenance of these dams that collapsed, the criticism now from the UN, and what happens next in Libya.
Yeah, and this has been a big question for several days, Hallie, because this situation is different, for example, than what happened in Morocco. In Morocco, you had an earthquake. Earthquakes kind of come out of nowhere, right? You don't really get any warning. But in Libya, you had a storm, and we generally know at least several days in advance when there's a storm moving in a certain direction. Today, we learned from the World Meteorological Association, basically the UN's weather agency, that in fact, the Libyan weather agency did know this storm was coming and issued alerts about 72 hours ahead of time. The UN's agency saying that means that the majority of these deaths could have been avoided. But while Libya's weather agency was able to say, look, we see extreme rainfall and flash flooding coming, the weather agency wasn't able to then talk about what the implications are going to be for those dams. That's not really the weather agency's responsibility, right? And this is where the failure of local agencies, of the regional government, of the national government, which doesn't exist in any cohesive fashion, comes into play. This is what emergency experts refer to as the chain of disaster management. You need each level of government doing their part to carry out a response to make sure those weather alerts turn into evacuation orders. That did not happen, and now we are seeing that massive loss of life. You mentioned the concern about disease and illness. We heard today from the Libyan health ministry saying they are worried about waterborne illness. They are worried about skin infections. We know that their version of the CDC has now deployed to these areas and are also sending in mobile clinics to try to get on top of this, Hallie.
Josh Letterman, thank you very much for that reporting. Alec Murdoch back in court today, facing yet another trial, which now has a start date for some of the hundreds of new charges against him, this time for alleged financial crimes. Look at this video. This is Murdoch back in court now, back in court for the first time since his murder trial. He's got another trial on the books, according to the state judge, as we're finding out today. November 27th, he'll face these allegations that he schemed his dead housekeeper's family out of a big insurance payout. Meaning just months after his very public double murder case came to an end, we will see him back in court again. His lawyers, not too happy about any of it. Listen to what they said.
This case was finished 6 months ago. To try this case in less than a year after the verdict came in the other case, don't we need to let it calm down a little bit? Where are you going to get a jury? Mars?
Where are you going to get a jury? Mars, he says. We'll talk about that in a second. But keep in mind that whatever happens with these financial charges, Murdoch is never going to be a free man. You probably remember he was convicted in March of killing his wife and son. He's serving a life sentence on those charges. NBC's Sam Brock is following this one for us. So, Sam, here we are now. I mean, it is sort of extraordinary to see Alec Murdoch back in court facing a whole separate set of charges, right? This was something on the double murder trial that was dubbed the South's so-called trial of the century here. Here we are again with the potential for Murdoch to face another trial.
Indeed, and the visuals, Hallie, are very different. No suit and tie or jacket for Alec Murdoch this time. Instead, he's wearing an orange jumpsuit. The setting, though, certainly the same, with the same judge, I might add. And Murdoch right now is serving 2 life sentences with no possibility for parole for murdering both his wife and his son, Paul, according to a jury that found him guilty. Now, the financial crimes, that's what was at issue today, Hallie, and we found out that there is going to be a trial for the state charges in November. Alec Murdoch facing 100-plus financial crime charges. Hallie, we're talking about everything from money laundering to wire fraud to false misrepresentation to all sorts of things. You see it on your screen right there. Tax evasion as well. He is accused of stealing almost $9 million from his clients. And this is so sad, Hallie, in the sense that one of them is the Gloria Satterfield family. Gloria Satterfield was a housekeeper and house cleaner for their family that basically raised Alec Murdoch's sons. She dies and he says, you know what, you guys should sue my estate so the insurance company can pay out all this money for your family, and then he steals that money. And it wasn't just him, Hallie. It was also a co-conspirator who pleaded guilty. His name is Corey Fleming. Listen to Mr. Fleming earlier today talking to the judge.
Today, I offer this court no excuses. There are no excuses. I place the blame for my actions on my shoulders, nobody else's. I never imagined standing here and being in this circumstance.
There were thoughts, Hallie, he was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, that the judge in this case might allow that to stand. He added a 20-year sentence concurrent to that federal one, but he basically added 16 more years behind bars for Corey Fleming.
Sam, there's also this dynamic, right? There was a lot of attention around that first trial. I mean, gavel-to-gavel coverage across multiple networks, multiple outlets, et cetera. And you heard his attorney say in court today, you know, made this allusion, he couldn't get a fair trial anywhere except for Mars, right? An allusion to the jury selection process here. Talk us through that. Did the judge push back on that at all?
He did. And the argument that was set out there by Alec Murdoch's attorneys, Dick Harpootlian, was basically that this was not just the highest profile trial in the history of the state of South Carolina. It was the highest profile trial, arguably, in modern television history. All of these folks were watching what's going on. And he said, what do you want me to do? Pull people from Mars to get an impartial jury just 6 months later? And the judge, as we said, had none of it. Just started listing all of these other counties that border Colleton County. And then Harpootlian said, well, look, do you think the people in those counties don't have internet or don't have television? But the judge just completely shot it down and said, we are doing this in November, understanding the precedent here, which is that there is intense interest. And it's just one of these stories, Hallie, that continues to have threads upon threads. And here we go now with the financial crimes as the next chapter.
Sam Brock live for us with this story. And you know what? Lots more pieces of the puzzle to come into place on this one. Sam, thank you for being there for us. To Florida now, where Governor Ron DeSantis is launching his latest fight against COVID vaccines, with his team now telling people in Florida not to get the new COVID shots, even though the CDC says the exact opposite. They're saying if you're 6 months and older, go out and get the new vaccine. DeSantis himself saying, I'm quoting, he says, I will not stand by and let the FDA and CDC use healthy Floridians as guinea pigs for new booster shots that have not been proven to be safe or effective. Keep in mind, the CDC has said the exact opposite, that these vaccines are proven to be safe and effective, with that agency now firing back at the governor. Dasha Burns is joining us now. DeSantis has tried to use some of these COVID shot concerns as a political tool. That is part of the backdrop for this latest back and forth that has exploded into the spotlight today. DeSantis spent part of his day defending what he's doing in Florida.
Well, Hallie, let's remember that it was DeSantis's bucking of the CDC and of federal COVID guidelines that really thrust him into the spotlight early on, that helped transform the Florida governor into a national Republican star at the height of the pandemic and arguably opened the door to his presidential bid. So now he's once again going against federal guidelines and advising to Floridians that people under the age of 65 do not get that COVID shot, that COVID booster. Now, the CDC is firing back. They're saying, quote, public health experts are in broad agreement about these facts, and efforts to undercut vaccine uptake are unfounded and dangerous. And look, as he struggles to catch Trump in the polls, he's leaning into what he knows works and what he feels is kind of the biggest contrast between him and the former president. So the former president did an interview with Megyn Kelly where he sort of tried to distance himself from Dr. Anthony Fauci, and DeSantis used that opportunity, has been on the offense today, really talking about how the former president needs to take more accountability, talking about how Trump, just recently we got a transcript from an interview he did where he said Trump cared too much about the polls in his COVID response, saying that he just did a better job in Florida and that any of Trump's criticisms about DeSantis when it comes to COVID are simply unfounded, talking again about how the difference between the national response and the Florida response just says so much about the difference between these two candidates. And so while he's the governor of Florida making these decisions right now, we can't forget that he is also a candidate, and this very much plays into his strategy on the campaign trail as well. The problem is this is also, while politics, it also has an impact on people's health here, Hallie.
Dasha Burns, thank you very much. Coming up, India is testing hundreds of people after 2 died from a super virus. How officials there think it's spreading. Plus, Drew Barrymore's alleged stalker just got arrested again, this time for trying to find another star. We'll get into it in a sec. A UFO gut check from NASA tonight with the agency in a highly anticipated report saying there's no proof that the stuff seen flying around is alien, but other than that, they're just not sure.
The NASA independent study team did not find any evidence that UAP have an extraterrestrial origin, but we don't know what these UAP are.
Those UAPs he's talking about, unidentified aerial phenomena, that's the jargony way of saying UFO. That's some of what you're seeing here. But NASA says some of the stuff flying around ended up just being like a plane or a balloon or a drone. Let's bring in Aaron Gilchrist for more on this. Listen, they're taking it seriously enough to put in place somebody who's going to direct, essentially, agency scrutiny of UAPs. Yeah. But still a lot of question marks out here and some recommendations.
And I think the fact that they're putting somebody in charge of looking at this data says to the rest of the world, you know what, it's time that we take this seriously. The administrator said that it's time to move from sensational to scientific when we're talking about UFOs. And so the agency with this panel, which had stood up last year, and this is the first concrete action that NASA has ever taken to look into UFOs in 65 years of its history. And this panel said, you know what, here are a couple of recommendations, things we think NASA can do that no other agency can do that will really force us to take a scientific look at the videos and the photos and all the things that seem to come out there with the reporting about unexplained things in the air. You can see some of the recommendations on the screen here. They think that using artificial intelligence, using machine learning will go a long way toward being able to definitively identify these things that have so far been unexplained. And all the tools that are available to NASA, satellites and the like, could help to get some real answers as opposed to just, the photos and I think I saw something floating around.
The speculation. I do wonder what this says about momentum inside the community of sort of UFO watchers, people who are looking for answers here. And if there were actually any evidence of non-human life or alien stuff, whatever, if we would even see it, Aaron. I mean, we know that this country can keep a secret.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's been the thing for decades, right? Where, the government knows that there are aliens and they just aren't telling us about it. And so in the conversation today, the NASA administrator said over and over again that NASA will be transparent, that NASA wants to take the information that it gathers, a lot of it is unclassified information that NASA is looking at, and that it's going to make that information available to the general public. I want to play a little bit of what Administrator Nelson said about making things available to everybody.
You bet your boots. We will say that. And I've tried to set the table for you by telling you what I personally believe in a universe that is so vast that could there be a replication of life on Earth elsewhere in another solar system that is so big? Of course I believe that.
But because scientists or the folks who work at NASA, he says that they want the evidence. Right. They want to be able to say that this points to direct evidence that life exists or that there are entities that are bringing things into our atmosphere. And, you talk about transparency. The DOD, the national intelligence community, will do what it does. But Nelson says,
which isn't tell us about stuff that's classified. That's
right, if it's classified. But Nelson says when they collect information, if they find answers, they intend to make it public.
Well, he said he bets his boots.
That's right.
So we'll take him up on that.
Nice boots, I bet.
Sure does. Aaron Gilchrist, thank you so much. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, we're just learning in the last few minutes, is expected to meet at the White House next week with President Biden. That is set to happen a week from today on Thursday. Zelensky is also planning to go to the United Nations General Assembly in New York City next week. While in Washington, by the way, we are also learning that he is expected to meet with lawmakers in the Capitol that same day, according to 2 people with direct knowledge. Number 2, the president of Broward College in Florida says he's resigning, but the college's board says not so fast. They did not immediately accept or reject that. They say he's still in his role. Remember, this is all after Governor Ron DeSantis appointed some conservative members to that board. The board says it wants to talk with the president about his decision, the college president, and do its best for students and the community. Number 3, Drew Barrymore's alleged stalker arrested again, this time accused of trying to find Emma Watson at a fashion show. He's charged with trespassing and disorderly conduct after allegedly breaking into an area backstage at a show in Brooklyn. To everybody saying, I want you back to NSYNC. You got it. The rumors. Heads up to my elder millennials. Listen to what I'm about to say. NSYNC has a new song ready to come out. Can you even? Did you also have NSYNC pillowcases? Was it just, I didn't. I'm just asking. The song's called Better Place, their first song in 20 years. It's going to come out in a couple weeks as part of an upcoming Trolls movie. What a world, man. Those are words that are part of a sentence that exists in 2023. So when we come back, we got a sneak peek at an exclusive one-on-one with former President Donald Trump. What he's telling our Kristen Welker, set to become moderator of Meet the Press, about pardoning himself if he's reelected. Plus, why Australia's biggest city is covered in smoke right now. It's coming up. Tonight, a ransomware group believed to be tied to a big cyber attack against a big Vegas casino is taking responsibility for the whole thing. And they say they're not going to stop if MGM doesn't pay up. Paying up is exactly what a different casino did, Caesars. Sources familiar with the matter, according to these sources, they tell our partner CNBC that Caesars paid a $15 million ransom to that cybercrime group, which saved them from a big cyber attack. Now, keep in mind that ransom was paid just days before MGM got hit with its own attack. Same group. Whole thing caused problems with people's keys, getting into their rooms, with reservations, with some of the stuff that happens in the course of operations at a casino. MGM still has not paid up and is trying to get its systems back up. Let's get to Dana Griffin in Los Angeles. This is such a high-profile example, Dana, of this ransomware attack issue that has affected a lot of different sectors and a lot of different industries. In this instance, what an interesting dichotomy here. Caesars gets attacked, and according to these sources talking to CNBC, pays up. MGM gets attacked and apparently does not. One casino's got a lot of problems, one casino does not.
Yeah, and Hallie, that hacker group believed to be tied to the MGM ransomware attack actually put out a statement, and they're pretty ballsy in the statement. They say, if a deal is not reached, we shall carry out additional attacks. We continue to wait for MGM to grow a pair and reach out, as they have clearly demonstrated that they know where to contact us. Now, the FBI is investigating and believe that this group may be behind both attacks, but obviously have handled this very differently. Hallie?
Yeah, I mean, a bold statement indeed here. Where does this go next, Dana? Like, in other words, what is going to get MGM back up and running at this point?
It's tough to say, and they may have to pay. Unfortunately, Hallie, we've actually spoken to some experts here, NBC News has, and they say sometimes in these cases it's best to pay the ransom, because if not, it opens up these companies to litigation from people who believe the company didn't do enough to protect their private information. So in some cases, you are better off paying, although law enforcement highly they do not want that to happen, because they feel like it gives an incentive for these groups to continue these sort of attacks. We've also got a statement from the CEO of MGM, Bill Hornbuckle, put out a statement to say that we continue to work diligently to resolve this issue. He also added that he wanted to thank his employees that have worked incredibly hard to maintain a high level of service. This is going to be devastating, likely for MGM, because Moody's is now reporting that the cybersecurity incident has caused them to be credit negative, which is going to impact their business in several different ways. Hallie?
Dana Griffin, lots to unpack there. Thank you very much for that reporting. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day, and because it's tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our international teams have done it for you. Here's some of what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of India, one southern state has shut down some schools, some offices, some other places to try to stop the spread of a deadly disease. The Nipah virus has killed 2 people there and infected 3 others. Now more than 700 people are getting tested for it. It's a rare virus. It doesn't spread easily, but it does have a high mortality rate. In Ecuador, police and military officers are raiding prisons around the country, going into places where prisoners have recently rioted and taken over, taking weapons, drugs, phones. The country's president says they're trying to stop criminal organizations. In Australia, look at this smoke blanketing Sydney for the 4th day in a row. It's coming from fires set on purpose. Fire officials set up these controlled burns nearby to try to basically burn off what could fuel wildfires, like to do it in a controlled way so it didn't get out of control later. It is almost summer, remember, in the southern hemisphere, and it's predicted to be super hot and super dry. Now to an exclusive one-on-one between former President Trump and our newly minted Meet the Press moderator, Kristen Welker, with former President Trump talking about his legal troubles, saying if he's reelected, one thing you probably won't see him do is pardon himself. Watch.
Mr. President, if you were reelected, would you pardon yourself?
I could have pardoned myself. Do you know what? I was given an option to pardon myself. I could have pardoned myself when I left. People said, would you like to pardon yourself? I had a couple of attorneys that said, you can do it if you want. I had some people that said it would look bad if you do it, because I think it would look terrible. I said, here's the story. These people are thugs, horrible people, fascists, Marxists, sick people. They've been after me from the day I came down the escalator with Melania. And I did a great job as president. People are acknowledged. Great economy, great jobs, great this, great that. Rebuilt the military, Space Force, everything. I could go on forever. Let me just tell you. I said the last thing I'd ever do is give myself a pardon.
More, of course, from that interview coming up this Sunday. Kristen's first show as the official moderator of Meet the Press. That is Sunday, right, on your local NBC News station. We should note, of course, the same invitation to sit down and talk with Kristen went out to President Biden. We will see if he takes her up on that. Still to come here on the show, some stunning new research out tonight about what happens in your brain after you almost die. We're talking about it next. Some pretty extraordinary new research is giving us a glimpse at what life looks like after you almost die. It's the first study of its kind. It suggests that a lot of people who survive cardiac arrests and who are revived by CPR have some kind of awareness, even when they're unconscious and being resuscitated. About 40% of them say they have memories or like dream-esque experiences. And these experiences they had are backed up by science. Brain waves that show signs of activity, in some instances for as long as an hour, as these people are being brought back to life. Dr. Kavita Patel is joining us now. And Dr. Patel, top lines here, because you're a doctor, you've had to give CPR to people. You have had, in some instances, a small number of instances, you were able to resuscitate somebody. Right. We were chatting during the commercial break, just full disclosure, and you said you are not at all surprised by these results. Tell me.
No. First of all, it's about the same rate I've experienced. About 9% of these resuscitations result in someone who kind of gets discharged from the hospital, and that's what I've personally experienced. And then of those people, a proportion of them describe these vivid scenes, even recalling details of being resuscitated or being kind of having someone that's died in their life telling them something and recalling these conversations. It just illustrates to me something that we've all seen in medicine, where there is a very blurry line at times between life and death, and that's that moment at resuscitation that you're at that border and you're right there in the moment. And I'll tell the resuscitation team, he or she can hear us, so let's be aware of that. And we say that even with patients in a coma, that they might be able to hear us. But this study just sheds light on there's a lot of things that we sometimes don't understand. And you can call it a higher power, but I kind of think of it as we're in that in-between space while we're resuscitating someone.
And were you surprised to see the science back it up, the brainwave activity?
No, and we've often kind of thought that, because people will all describe during moments of resuscitation, and especially if you get to meet the patient when they're discharged.
Have you had that experience?
I have, and they've said, doctor, I think I remember your voice, or your voice sounds so familiar. And I'll say, you know, your heart stopped beating. So I think that's amazing. But their brain activity, as we now know in this study, illustrated that they had brainwave activity. And then, of course, these people, it's a small number, 28, but these are the people that survived. And they survived, and they were able to be interviewed. So we have the most information from survivors.
I feel like in any other instance, you and I would talk about a study, and 28 would seem like such a tiny sample size. How seriously should we be taking the results of this study?
I think in light of the fact that we're trying to educate more people about the benefits of CPR, I think this is a great illustration. 28 is a small number. To me, the big number is that these are 28 people that would never have been able to give these interviews if we didn't have that resuscitation and this technology. We've had a lot of famous people that have gotten in the news for resuscitation, but this reminds you that it could be anybody. It could be you. It could be me that was in that hospital bed, and all the memories from it.
Does this give you an extra beat now? And you already do it, as you say, just to say, like, okay, you do want to kind of have that calm demeanor in that room.
We do, and remember, it's a person. It's so easy. We try to be objective in medicine. It's a person. It's someone's mother, daughter, sister, father, and that's that person. And they might remember my voice, and that might be something that gives them peace at that moment. And even if they don't make it, that might give them peace in that moment, and that's important.
Dr. Kaveh Patel, Dr. Patel, it is intense stuff. It's heavy, and I appreciate you being here to talk us through. Thank you. We've got a lot more to get to here on the show, including superstar Jack Johnson talking recovery and rebuilding in his native Hawaii after those deadly fires in Maui. The big news he's hoping to make tomorrow to try to help. We'll go one-on-one in the Newsmaker next. Tomorrow, a new push to try and get more help to people on the island of Maui, as we're getting a better sense now of the scope of the disaster 5 weeks after a wildfire incinerated the historic town of Lahaina. 115 people confirmed dead, 800 businesses lost, more than 2,000 buildings destroyed. 7,000 people are now unemployed, and 16,000 have asked for help from FEMA. It's against that backdrop that superstar Jack Johnson, the musician who grew up in Hawaii, is joining forces with 2 others to release a benefit album tomorrow and perform a sold-out show Monday to raise money and support the recovery. Jack Johnson is joining us now. Thank you so much for being with us. I know this has been a long and difficult road for you and so many people in Hawaii. We're glad to have you here. Can you talk a little bit, sir, about what it was like? Sort of take me back to when you first heard what was happening, when you woke up and heard, like so much of the rest of the world did, about what had happened to Lahaina and to this state that you know and that you love.
Yeah, well, woke up to sort of the news in the morning, and word travels fast these days. There's so many ways to communicate. And so I started getting sort of text and phone calls from friends and getting filled in that it was unfortunately going to be a lot more devastating than we were even hearing at first. And yeah, the stories are just heartbreaking. I mean, I live 2 islands away. I'm on Oahu, but Maui is really close to my heart. I got a lot of close friends and family over on Maui and spent a lot of time there growing up with my dad and my parents and close friends. So yeah, just hearing the news, and there were obviously multiple fires in different places. So I was just checking in the morning on lots of different families. And so anyways, yeah, just heart goes out to everybody in Lahaina. We're just trying to support that community as much as we can as we find out how we can support them.
I know one thing that's important to you and to so many people in Hawaii is maintaining the Hawaiian culture as the long and slow rebuilding process begins. One of the things we've covered a lot on this show has been this tension between, what happens to these properties, the issue that we've talked to people about the potential for predatory buyers coming in. How do you see that sort of tension between wanting to rebuild, wanting to make sure that people in Lahaina, people on Maui can rebuild, but also maintaining what is so special about this really incredible historic town?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, there's so many, it goes so deep, and I wish I could have all the answers for the really tough questions, because it's a worrisome time right now with people who've been there their whole lifetime and for generations, like you mentioned, unfortunately, like potentially losing their home. And so it's just trying to support as much as we can people getting their homes back. And then as the rebuilding process happens, just trying to have as many conversations as I can, because like I said, I know the place well, but I'm not from there. So it's all about listening to the people who are from there and learning how they want to rebuild their community, how to get it back to how it was, and just an even brighter future if we can go back to a lot of the traditional ways that people were doing things before and incorporate them in our current culture. But there's, beautiful stories of Hui o Va'a Kaulua, which is a Polynesian voyaging group that had one of the oldest canoes in Hawaii, Mo'olele. I keep telling the story because I think it's important for people to learn. It's if we can rebuild those types of things that were the heart of the community to make sure to rally around. There's a lot of really amazing people. It's a really resilient community there. They just need our support, but it's just all about us listening to what they need and supporting their vision, really.
That support is going to be so key. You look at the numbers, for example, on Maui, unemployment has skyrocketed. Something like 8,000 people filed for unemployment on the island since the fires happened in early August. Tourists, the message was clear, I think, tourists don't come here, right, in the immediate aftermath. Now, state officials say, hey, okay, it's time to get tourists back, but they're requesting respect, of course, for everything that happened, to treat this place with the respect respect that it deserves. What is, as a Hawaiian, a native Hawaiian, what is your advice to people here on the mainland, to people around the world who are looking at maybe a trip to Hawaii? What would you tell them?
Oh, that's such a tough question. It's really about listening to that community. I think they're going through a healing process right now, letting that community heal and have time to grieve. But, you know, there's many islands, and I'm sure that, you know, there's a lot of people on Maui that could use the support too. So figuring out ways that we can support those businesses, but really trying to listen to that community about when the right time is, in my opinion, you know, but it depends on who you talk to, I'm sure, with that one.
Do you see an opportunity to perhaps rebuild in a more sustainable way? You're somebody who's been a leader in trying to make the music industry more environmentally conscious. You've been an advocate for environmental education.
Yeah, so the way that environmental education gets talked about in Hawaii quite a bit is aina-based education. It's really about looking at the traditional knowledge that Hawaii had for generations and going back to things like the ahupua'a system, which was basically a sustainable functioning system in most valleys around the islands. And so there's so much we can learn from the Hawaiian culture. And so I think there's a great opportunity to tap into a lot of that Hawaiian knowledge when going through the rebuilding process. There's, you know, people who've been doing things for a long time there before the fires happened that are some of the community leaders that are rising up during this time of just supporting, making sure people are sheltered and have food. Those are a lot of the same people that they know where the food comes from, they know how to provide it, and so they're a lot of the ones doing the feeding right now. So I think they're learning quite a bit, just even from these local food hubs, on ways that they could implement some of those things into the rebuild and building the community again.
So let's talk about tomorrow. Benefit album comes out. You've got this sold-out benefit concert Monday to try to raise some money for relief efforts. What should people know about that? I think the impetus to it, it sounds like, was you conversing with some people who were so shaken by the fires, going, hey, we've got to do something to help here. This is what we can do.
Yeah, the two friends that were on that cover image you just showed, Paula Funga and John Cruz. John lives on Maui and his family, and Paula spends a lot of time on Maui, has a lot of relatives there and friends. And so all three of us were just talking about trying to get a show together, and then the idea of going back and listening to this recording we had from 2012. There's just so much love from the audience you can hear, and just being able to, you know, keep that love going and then right back to Maui. The idea that we liked is that perpetually this could every year be raising funds, because it's going to be a long story and it might fade for people outside of Hawaii, but it's going to be a long road to getting things back to some type of normalcy and then trying to expand on the beauty like we've been talking about. So this album is a way that we can continue to support as community members.
Jack Johnson, thank you so much. The album out tomorrow, the concert again on Monday. We so appreciate you being here and continuing to shine a spotlight on a place that we know means so much to you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for shining that spotlight today. I appreciate it.
That does it for us for this hour. We've got a lot more coverage picking up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.